Armenia, a country with the oldest winery in the world. Their wines once were enjoyed by aristocrats, winning top awards in Paris competitions. At some point, they disappeared. So what happened? Let's discover this story together. I'm Arsen Khachaturyants, probably the youngest winemaker in the world. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and let's open a bottle of history together. 1900, Paris. One of the biggest world fairs of the century, the Exposition Universelle, features not only art, but an impressive selection of wines from around the world. America, Asian countries, and Europe bring their top winemakers eager to shape the preferences of aristocrats around the world. Unexpectedly, several gold medals were claimed by the Russian Empire under the brand Wineries of Armenian owners of Yerevan and Tiflis. Producers from Caucasus and Transcaucasia present their wines. Sweet fortified from Ararat Valley, dry reds made from Armenia, and some local fruit-based wines. They head home loaded with awards, which opened the doors to the empire and beyond. Now their wines can be shipped as far as Riga, Warsaw, and Vienna. St. Petersburg doesn't remain on the sidelines either. Russian dandies, always quick to catch the European trends, start taking pride in the local wine. Ararat wine and Yerevan Muscat become the city's latest craze. Needless to say, wines from empire's top producers, Shiraza, Shakhnazaryan, Arutyan and Sons, rarely made it to the tables of ordinary peasants. No, we aren't going to look for the signs of revolution in this market, but everything changed in 1917, and the wine industry was no exception. Winemaking is, among other things, the art of working with time. Every winemaking family knew where Areni grapes grew best, how many days the must should ferment in a karas, how to shield the vines from an April hailstorm. But in 1920, time speeds up. History picks up its pace. Wine is no longer a family business. It becomes the business of a state. In November 1920, Armenia officially becomes a part of the Soviet Union, a young state flexing its muscles. A few months later, after everyone in the region gets a sense of what socialist means and why it's called a republic, wine comes into the picture. The People's Commissariat, aka Ministry for Food Supplies, launches a sweeping campaign to nationalize winemaking businesses. And this is how the great market overhaul begins. Now, it's not about Paris awards. It's about making wine accessible to regular people. Almost all major wineries are nationalized, including estates in Areni, Vaedzor, Ararat, and family businesses in the villages of Ashtarak and Yehednadzor. Nerses Teyran is a prominent philanthropist and alcohol producer at the turn of the 20th century. In the 1870s, he buys land on the site of a former Yerevan fortress and throws himself into making wine and brandy. A famous relative, the artist Ivan Ivazovsky, helps him build the factory. The technology is a mix of traditional Armenian distilling and French aging methods. Just 5 years before the revolution, Nerses has the full confidence of a successful entrepreneur and even an innovator. He believes Armenian brandies are more than just strong alcohol. They have a soul. But only 8 years later, his business is nationalized, and Teyran has to go into hiding abroad. This is now the Yerevan Ararat brandy factory. The scale is obvious even to the naked eye. GOST, aka state standards, make the product accessible. But as one of Teyran's masters said, they kill the soul of a drink. Standardizing strength, color, and aroma soon make it possible to scale the production for the masses. The Yerevan Ararat brandy factory becomes the first to have its own regulations, rules, and numbers instead of tasting notes. Many winemakers leave the country or come under government pressure. Some, like Armenak Arutyan, try to resist. But the peculiar socialist progress is impossible to stop. The state takes full control of production. The government solely focuses on increasing the volume, with flavor left out of the equation. In the next era, the pre-war and wartime of the USSR, alcohol becomes one of the key engines of economic growth. The start of the Second World War hits all Soviet people hard. Grief and death reach every family. The economy faces a severe test. The country shifts to a war footing. Resources and manpower are redirected to the military-industrial complex. But the Soviet state doesn't forget about winemaking. Its socio-political importance during these years can't be overstated. Soldiers are cold and tired. The people live in a constant state of shock, and the front lines are soaked in blood. In the harsh new times, strong drinks take on a special, almost ritual status. They help not only to cope with stress, but often to physically survive extreme conditions. Anastas Mikoyan, People's Commissar, aka Minister, for Internal and Foreign Trade, begins converting winemaking facilities to produce ethanol, liquors, and fortified wine products for the war front from the very first months of the war. Armenian brandy, once an elite export, becomes service brandy. It's poured into army flasks and sent to command rations and medical units. Production capacity is pushed to the limit. Unexpectedly, the Soviet push to standardize alcohol production begins to pay off. The current trade commissar Mikoyan, who a decade earlier fought against the local character of production in the Armenian SSR, now showcases the advantages of state control. By 1943, brandy production in Armenia nearly triples. Despite the shortages of raw materials, the commissar manages to establish regular alcohol supplies to the front. But these intense measures have clear consequences. Grape variety shrinks and flavor quality declines. The genetic richness of Armenian wine is deliberately simplified for the sake of volume. Out of more than 50 indigenous grape varieties, only 2 remained during the war, Areni Noir and Mskali. After the war, both in Leningrad and Yerevan, people are drinking dry table wine number 4. Some winemakers mockingly classify this beverage as liquid with a memory of wine. The Soviet people win the war, but those who survived the catastrophe will never be the same, so their habits, traditions, and way of consumption change as well. The Soviet economy takes a long time to stabilize. Only by the early 1950s, the post-war crisis can be considered over. The winemaking industry is slowly recovering too, after the turmoil of wartime mobilization. Gradually, production at the plants starts to settle into the calmer rhythm. This doesn't mean people can enjoy a domestic Bordeaux, or that blenders can experiment with subtle flavor notes and special varieties. But compared to the wartime conditions, when plain spirits were a luxury, the mid-20th century offers a bit of space to breathe. At the same time, 2 branches of wine production take shape. On one hand, the push for mass production continues. An average Soviet citizen still buys wine without a vintage or grape variety on the label. A 3-liter bottle of semi-sweet red, sealed with a plastic cap, is a typical product of those times. The names are generic and impersonal. Armenian table wine, Southern Dry, and dessert wine number 7. These wines are made at the blending plants where wine materials come from various republics, Armenia and Georgia. There's no difference between regions. Meeting the quarterly plan comes first. Factories and state farms measure output in tons, not in tones of flavor. Priority goes to high-yield grape varieties, regardless of how refined their flavors are. Mskali, Khachaturyants, and Italian Riesling push out the indigenous and difficult-to-cultivate Areni and Hdongi. On the other hand, great importance is given to producing the so-called diplomatic arsenal, wines meant for display. This type of product is supplied to officials who interact with the outside world. Ambassadors and diplomats give fancy bottles as presents to the head of state, bring them to negotiations, and pack them into diplomatic gift basket. After all, Soviet-made was supposed to mean one thing: quality. An entire industry is built to showcase products to foreign partners, products completely out of reach for ordinary Soviet citizens. The trend feels very much like the Tsarist era. No more medals from Paris exhibition, but at least an anecdote from Molotov's memoirs about the British Prime Minister's approval of a Soviet brandy. Churchill was fond of Armenian brandy Dwin. They say that after the Yalta conference, he was sent a case of it every single day. And so, the Yerevan Ararat brandy factory becomes the heart of export production. The now iconic Dwin and Ararat are made right here. To meet the demand, the entire facility undergoes reconstruction in 1953. In a climate of consumer inequality, heroes of resistance begin to emerge. Artashes Petrosyan, a hereditary winemaker and director of a state wine farm in Vyazor, is one of them, preserving his family's recipes and the vineyard observations log started by his grandfather. Petrosyan launches an experiment. He tries cultivating pure varietal Areni and aging it in oak barrels, following old traditions. The result is a wine of dense structure, bold tannins, and unique acidity. However, the project draws criticism at the Republic level and is quickly shut down by the authorities of Armenian SSR. Winemaking in the Caucasus and Southern Russia regions don't truly come back to life until the early 2000s. After the collapse of USSR, the winemaking culture of the former republics had to start from scratch. It wasn't just about replanting vineyards. We had to ask ourselves, what kind of wine do we want to make? Who is it for? What should it taste like? What story should it tell? We had to learn to drink wine and invent it again. And you know what? We definitely got something right. Today, Armenia has not one, but two hubs of winemaking revival. Vyazor, the homeland of Areni, and of course, the Ararat Valley. The wineries here have become the symbol of national renaissance. In 2007, archaeologists discovered the world's oldest winery in the Areni 1 cave, dating back more than 6,000 years. This gave the entire industry a huge boost. After decades focused solely on brandy production, the regions around Yerevan are returning to winemaking. A new generation of winemakers is blending Asian heritage with modern technology. A similar trend is happening in Georgia, where regions like Kakheti, Imereti, and Lukumi are going through a deep reconsideration, shifting from mass production toward defining their own unique identity. Russia's Kuban region isn't staying on the sidelines. In the Kryukov Valley, they are making wine following French standards: chateau, microclimates, barrel aging, and blind tastings. They even work with grape varieties rare in Russia, like Maréchal Foch, Albarino, and Sangiovese. Today, you can buy Armenian and Georgian wines in London, Copenhagen, Tokyo, and Brooklyn. They are favored by sommeliers and appreciated by fans of small batch production. This is no longer about nostalgia or exotic charm. It's about a region reclaiming its place on the global stage.